Hello and welcome to the 7S War Novels podcast. In this podcast, you'll hear from members of 7S speak about novels that they've been looking at from their own free choice and recommended by their teacher, which is me, Miss Barton, and also by our new librarian, Ms Varga. If you like the sound of any of the books that you hear, don't hesitate to ask your English teacher or also to send an email and look on the library website for more information about those books. I'm sure Miss Varga will be really happy to point you in the direction of other things that you like. Hope you enjoy listening to all of this.
So I read Monsters of Men by Patrick Ness. It's a book about an alien war on a planet where humanity have had to migrate to get away from Old World, which is current Earth, because it just got too dangerous there. So I think it's got a very unique theme, because I haven't seen many other books do it so that you have one character's perspective, quickly switching to another's, and back. And it gives you a really good idea of everything that's happening, but at the same time, it doesn't get boring.
Okay, and the three perspectives, who are the three perspectives? What roles do they play?
So you have the main character, who is Todd from the first book, and his best friend Viola, who I guess counts as the love interest in the book. And then you also have the perspective of one of the aliens called the Spackle, who was this one called 1017 was really significant in the previous book, The Ask and the Answer. Yeah.
Okay, and what sort of impression did it give you about war?
It was horrible. It didn't hold back with any description. It was all just, so this happened, and it went into a full description. You could basically see everything in your head.
Excellent, thank you. Okay.
So my name's Fridasa. The book I'm going to talk about is Line of Fire, and it's actually written by an unknown soldier on the side of the French, so fighting against Hitler. So this book was when I read this book, it really gave me an idea of war, what it felt like to be just any old soldier, but it felt like an honor to fight, because you're doing it for a good sort of cause. And then so this unknown soldier, he describes all of that in the book, so it makes it really interesting to read about, because soldier, especially in the world wars, they just the people just fight like random people.
Interesting, lovely, thank you.
So my name's Jatish, and I read the Mahabharata. You might not have heard it. It's set in ancient India, and it's a war between two brotherhoods. They're both fighting for a kingdom in India, like a state, so a kingdom. So the narration, so how it's written is actually who wrote it down was actually a sage, but it's narrated by there's a blind king, and this blind king wants to know what's happened, and apparently there's this person with the power who can see what's happening even though he's not there, so he narrates it to the king, so you see it through that perspective, so you see the narration. And one moment is that I found that apparently as Krishna told Arjuna about what to do, because a warrior is saying he has to fight. The build-up's been going, and when it's about battle time, just before it's battle time, a warrior, one of the most important warriors, says, "I don't want to fight." So it's really shocking to me. And then the god called Krishna tells him, sometimes you have to do your duty or your good, what you have to do for the good of everybody else, even if it means hurting your own family, hurting your friend, because if they're doing wrong, you kind of have to solve it. And this gives the impression war is really, really tough, but you have to do something you don't always want to do. And I find it very powerful as a moment, which like tells me now that even if I don't want to do it, if it's the right thing, I should do it. It's like a morals teaching in a story. And I also learned that even if it isn't the nicest thing to do, sometimes you just do it just for the sake of everybody else.
So for the greater good.
Yes.
Very interesting, very interesting, very different book from the ones that we normally read, isn't it? You know, reading something that's, you know, from your culture, but something that we maybe wouldn't necessarily read because it's not something from our culture. So I'm really pleased that you chose that book, really pleased. So we've got a fantasy book. We've got remind me what your book was again?
Private Peaceful.
Private Peaceful. So we've got a First World War book, we've got a fantasy book, we've got a Second World War book, and yours, I was a little bit confused whether yours was First World War or Second World War.
I think it was the second.
You think it was the Second
Yeah.
World? So did they talk about Nazi Germany? Did they talk about that? Okay, so that's definitely the Second World War, isn't it? So what kind of overall impression do you think you got from your books about war and what war's like? Yes, Jitish.
I got the impression war is something. I'd say you don't want it to happen at the start, but it happens. So you have to fight for your country, fight for what's right. And I've always thought of it. I always thought the Germans was a bad side, as everybody thinks. But then you've got to think they're fighting for their country, for their families at home. So I always think there's never really a winner in war. Everybody loses somebody, and eventually.
Very good, very good. Yes.
From my book, I learned that war was horrendous. So you kill people, you get killed, do what your boss tells you. So maybe like a colonel. Basically, yeah, it's about fighting for whatever you don't. No, not whatever you don't want, but it's fighting when you don't want to. Because you know that there's just people just like you, and then you're just fighting against innocent people who've been hired by the bad guys in your mind. So there's people like you, and then yeah.
Interesting. So if you had to choose one of the other books to read, which book would you read?
I think I would choose Daniel's. It seems very interesting, especially for the fact that there are many different perspectives. Sounds very fun.
Okay, so you'd like to read the Chaos Walking trilogy by Patrick Ness. Yeah. Okay, look out for those books then. Daniel, which book do you think you'd like to read?
I thought Jatish sounded interesting because it wouldn't be like anything I've ever read before, and I think the whole idea of it being told from a blind man's perspective, but not actually from his perspective, is also quite weird.
Interesting. So maybe I should get a copy of that for the library. What do you think, Jatish?
Yeah.
Yeah. Send me the details.
Okay.
I'll put a copy in the library. Jatish, which book do you think you'd like to read?
I'd like to read Ben's because it just sounds ever so interesting as for a group of kids in a war. You always think of war as a soldiers fighting, killing. You never think how it affects kids and how some soldiers are actually nice, even though they're German. So I really liked how Ben's sounded. I really want to read that book. I might try and get it for myself.
Excellent. Well, we've got a copy in the library.
I'd probably read Private Peaceful because it's written by Michael Morpurgo and he generally writes quite good books and it sounds quite interesting.
Excellent. Last but not least.
I think I'd go for Daniel's as well, because the whole bit about like all the story, it seems quite interesting, like with your best friend, and the way how it's set in a series seems like a continuation, like in chronological order. So I like this. So yeah, I'll go for it.
Okay. Excellent. So the Chaos Walking trilogy is seems like that's going to be flying off the library shelves then. The Knife of Never Letting Go is the first book in the series. Oh, of Monsters and Men is the first one. No,
No, Knife
the
Let Go, then it's Ask Her the Answer.
Yeah.
Chaos Walking.
Excellent. Good. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Are you all right to stop for Carnegie yet?
Yes.
For 10 minutes, 3:30. Fabulous. Good. Thank you very much.
Well, I read The Boy in the Striped Pajamas by John Boyne.
I read Private Peaceful by Michael Moore Varga.
I read A Medal for Leroy by Michael Moore Varga. I read the Mahabharata. I'm not sure. I read Shadow by Michael Moore Varga.
Also to Michael Moore Varga fan. You want to kick us off what Shadow?
So Shadow is based on it's about 10-year-old boy who lived with his sick mother in Afghanistan during the Afghanistan versus US war. And whilst he's living there, he meets a Springer Spaniel who always comes at exactly the same time and then follows him down to the river when he's getting water. So he then looks after it, names it, and then when he moves with his mum to somewhere else to try and find salvation from the war, he takes the dog with him and looks after them for the rest of his life.
Oh, nice. I love that book.
Yeah.
What do you kind of like about it?
I just really like how strong the connection is, and that through everything they went through hundreds of miles of travel, they still stayed together.
Yeah, the relationships at the heart of that book are really lovely.
Yeah, it's really powerful.
Okay, do you want to start and tell us the book you read?
Okay. My book was called The Pride of Baghdad. It's set in Baghdad around 2000, the year 2000, when America were bombing Iraq.
It's not a war I know a lot about, so how did you find the book? Is it something you knew a lot about before you read it?
Well, I knew quite a bit about Baghdad considering half of my family was born there.
Oh, really? So you had a connection to the story?
Yeah, and I found this book when the librarian was suggesting books, and she brought out some more books, and I chose this one.
Oh, amazing! And what did you enjoy most or find most interesting?
Well, to be honest, I found this might be a bit weird, but I found the graphic parts to be quite interesting.
Did you? What perspective are they kind of from?
They're third person.
Third person. Does that change how you view the?
Not really.
Not really. But I think third person sometimes you do from a bit of distance. Would you recommend this book to?
Yeah, I would recommend it to a few people.
That would be good to know. What book?
I read Soldier Dog by Sam Angus. It's set in 1917 in World War One in England and France. And a 14-year-old boy called Stanley, he really wants to join the army because his brother's in the army, and his dad's not being very nice to him, and he wants to leave his dad.
So it's a bit of an escape.
Yeah, basically he's escaping. And he trains to become a dog handler in England, and then when he's in France, he gets put with a dog that he owned like 3 years ago before in England, and he and his dog saved Paris by getting a message back to HQ that like signalled where a German gun point was, and because they were attacking Paris, and it saved them from the attack. It's narrated by the young boy in first person, so it's a bit like a diary. And it was probably one of the best books I've read.
Really? That's quite a recommendation.
Yeah.
But that's one to make a note of.
Yeah.
So I read Private Peaceful by Michael Moore Varga, and it's set like over quite a few years, maybe from like 1910 to 1916 or something.
Thank you. Okay, so I read about the Hunger Games Mockingjay, and it's quite a good book. What it does is it shows war is illustrated because of the two sides, capital and the rebels, fighting against each other for one main goal. But both of them, at the end of the book, they realised that the leaders were both power-hungry tyrants. So it just sort of equals out when it shows that both sides are equally as bad as each other, and no side is ever like playing fair or by rules.